the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a federal case that has certainly grabbed headlines. It features an individual with a rather unexpected past and, well, a series of pretty alarming allegations.
It really does.
For you, the informed listener, our mission with this deep dive is, as always, to meticulously examine the allegations, the individual's background, and the specific online activities that led to these federal charges.
And we're using just the provided source material here.
Exactly. We're here to distill the key insights, help you understand the core mechanics of such complex cases, without getting bogged down in unnecessary detail.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is how multiple seemingly disparate threads just converge.
Like what?
Well, you've got this decorated professional background, extensive social media activity, and then these very serious legal charges, all in one story.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's introduce the core subject.
Yeah.
Peter Stinson.
Right.
He's a Virginia resident, recently arrested, and now facing federal charges.
That's right. And the court documents, they lay out quite a comprehensive professional background for him.
Okay.
He served as a lieutenant in the Coast Guard from 1988 to 2021. That's a long time.
Wow, yeah. Over 30 years.
Exactly. And it's notable, the documents mention he received awards for sharpshooting skills during that period.
Sharpshooting. Okay, that seems potentially relevant, given the context we'll get into.
Potentially, yes. Also, interestingly, he was apparently a FEMA instructor during those same years.
Coast Guard and FEMA instructor.
And the documents also identify him as a self-identified Antifa member.
Okay, that is quite a mix. Decorated military career, emergency response instruction, sharpshooting awards, and a self-identified political label that, well, it often draws sharp public attention.
It's definitely a complex picture.
What does this combination, or maybe even contradiction, tell us about the layers here?
Well, I think it shows how investigators piece together these, distinct threads. You have a history of discipline, service, this specialized skill like sharpshooting, and then a particular political identity.
And they use all that to build a profile.
Essentially, yes,
Oh.
to form a comprehensive picture of the individual. And that profile then helps inform how they interpret the alleged online activity.
I see.
It just underscores that these cases, they're rarely black and white. Understanding the full context of the person involved is pretty critical for investigators.
Okay, so with Stinson's background now somewhat established, let's turn to the heart of it all. The allegations themselves. You said serious allegations. The court documents apparently describe a pattern stretching back years. So what's the core accusation?
The central accusation against Stinson is making numerous online assassination threats against President Donald Trump.
Okay, assassination threats.
Yes, and these threats are reported to have occurred from 2020 right through to this year, June 2025.
So multi-year period.
Correct. Using his accounts, reportedly, across both X and Bluesky.
And what was the nature of these threats, generally speaking?
The documents mention discussions about how he would, quote, pull the trigger to get rid of Trump. Things along those lines.
It's, profoundly disturbing detail. And you mentioned specific language. Let's look at some of the specific examples described in the criminal complaint.
Sure. The documents do provide several concrete examples. For instance, back in April 2020, there was an ex-user's post about suing Trump. Stinson allegedly responded to that.
And what did he allegedly say?
According to the complaint, he replied, "Somebody ought to do more than sue the orange meths." That's redacted slightly, obviously.
Right.
And then he reportedly added, "It involves a rifle and a scope, but I can't talk about it here."
Wow. Explicit mention of weapons.
Yes. And following that, he supposedly offered, "I'd be willing to pitch in $100 for a contract."
A contract.
Yeah, who wants to join me? We could solve the solvable part of this problem in a crack. Then we can focus on the coronavirus itself. That's the alleged quote.
Okay, that's incredibly specific and alarming. And beyond those general threats, you mentioned other chilling language, like the Luigi reference.
Ah, yes. That's another specific instance cited. On May 9th, just last month it seems, Stinson reportedly wrote that Trump needed to be Luigi'd.
And what does that mean?
Well, the source clarifies this was apparently a reference to Luigi Mangione.
The person accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year.
Exactly. That's the connection the documents draw.
Okay.
And beyond that specific term, the allegations also mention, more broadly, graphic threats involving guns, poisoning, even knives, and again, across multiple social media platforms.
It's one thing to make alleged threats, but the timing? The document suggests some were made even after the assassination attempt on the president in 2024.
That's a critical point the complaint highlights, yes. Some of the threats cited were allegedly posted following the attempt on the president's life at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania.
How significant is that timing in a legal context? What does it suggest?
Well, legally, it could potentially speak to intent or persistence. The complaint quotes Stinson allegedly writing around that time, "Most of us are not capable."
Capable of what?
It seems to imply carrying out such an act. He allegedly continued, "As noted before, I'm not a good enough shot. Very few people are. Somebody needs to learn this lesson.
Okay.
You want to play in the big leagues, you need the talent. Luck is not a plan. Execution is critical."
And that links back to his sharpshooting background you mentioned earlier.
It's certainly a striking statement, especially given that background. It really forces you to confront the alleged intent behind these online words, making them feel, incredibly potent.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The court documents also point to a specific numeric reference, 8647. What's the FBI saying about that?
Right, the 8647 references. This is interesting because it shows how law enforcement connects dots online.
How so?
The FBI claims this was likely a reference to former FBI Director James Comey's post using 8647.
I remember that. The media interpreted that as a kind of coded threat to Trump.
Exactly. News outlets reported it that way, and it prompted an investigation at the time. The documents state that Stinson allegedly made 13 additional posts on Bluesky, including that same number, 86747.
So, repeated use of a number already flagged as potentially threatening in a similar context.
Precisely. It highlights, the sophistication of online monitoring sometimes and the digital breadcrumbs people can leave, maybe inadvertently, especially using these kinds of consistent, seemingly coded identifiers.
And was there a very recent post mentioned?
Yes. The complaint concludes with the most recent alleged post cited from just June 11th, 2025.
This month.
Yeah. On Bluesky again, it reportedly read, "When he dies, the party is going to be huge." Spelled Y-U-G-E.
Okay. So, bringing this to the present then, what's the current legal status?
Stinson hasn't entered a plea yet. He's expected back in court on Wednesday, June 18th.
So very soon.
Yes, to deal with these federal charges of making threats to kill the president.
For our listeners, what are the typical next steps in a federal case like this, especially one involving alleged threats against the president?
Well, it's a serious process, obviously. With federal charges like these, you're looking at arraignment, likely, where he formally enters a plea, then discovery, where both sides exchange information, evidence, and then potentially motions, hearings, and maybe eventually a trial, unless there's some kind of plea agreement reached beforehand.
And the fact that these are federal charges originating from online activity.
That underscores the broad reach and, frankly, the seriousness with which these types of digital actions are prosecuted now. It's a pretty clear signal, I think, that online speech, when it crosses that line into what's deemed a credible threat, absolutely has real-world legal consequences.
Indeed. And as we've tried to make clear throughout this deep dive, our aim is simply to impartially lay out the facts as presented in the source material. We want to ensure you, our listener, are well informed about the specifics, the allegations, the legal mechanics at play here. We're not endorsing any viewpoint.
Exactly. What these documents really lay bare is that intricate dance between online expression, the question of alleged intent, and the legal framework designed to protect public figures.
Quite the intersection.
It really is. And it's a stark reminder, isn't it, that the digital realm isn't truly anonymous, and what's said online can pretty swiftly transition into serious legal action.
Especially looking at the timeline you laid out.
Right. The timeline of alleged activity we've examined really illustrates how a digital footprint can lead pretty directly sometimes right to the courtroom.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really leaves us with a compelling question, I think. In an era where communication is so instant, so global, how do we, as a society, continually recalibrate our understanding of that blurry but incredibly important line between free speech and actual actionable threats?
Especially when they involve figures of power.
It's a conversation that clearly isn't ending anytime soon.